Hi, this is my Aunt Effie, and I'm going to talk to you today about a wonderful book that I finished reading just a little bit ago. It's called James, and it's by Percival Everett. We have a picture of Percival. This is such an exciting book for me because when I grew up, I read Huckleberry Finn as a child, and I just loved the whole idea of being on the Mississippi River in the summertime and going down. And I've always been very interested in the time period. It's just before the Civil War starts, so things are heated up pretty hot and heavy as far as the time of history goes. But this is the story of Huckleberry Finn through the eyes of Jim. And throughout the course of the book, Jim decides that his name is James. This actually saves him towards the end of the book from getting caught because he's a person who has run away. The book, this is a book club book, and the book club is part of my local library. And I was so amazed that when I arrived at the book club for our monthly conversation, there was only one other person besides me that had ever read Huckleberry Finn. I was absolutely astounded because in my age group, I just couldn't imagine that someone didn't read Huckleberry Finn. I mean, I thought we were all crazy about Mark Twain, and I think I've read everything that Mark Twain has written. Maybe not, but I think so. Huckleberry Finn was so fun for me that I read it as a summer read year after year after year. And in fact, it wouldn't surprise me to find out that I've read Huckleberry Finn upwards of 30 times. So there aren't too many nuances, too many events, too many details that I don't know about Huckleberry Finn. But in this book, we get to see the difference between what that experience was like for a child, Huckleberry, and an adult male, Jim. One of the things that was fascinating in the book is that the author, Percival, really shows us this double language that the slaves speak. And I've known about this before. The slaves had to have their own language so that they could communicate with each other in order to pass information back and forth and not be harmed by their white masters. What I didn't know that showed up in this book is that oftentimes in that secret language that they were using, that white people could not understand, they were actually making fun of white people. And I thought that was interesting and pretty cool. So the need to pretend to be simple was shown very strongly in this book. It was necessary for survival that Black people appeared to be uneducated, and it wasn't easy for them to become educated anyway, but they had to appear to be like not very smart. They had to appear to be dumb. And I'm telling you, this is not a child's book. Like, I read Huckleberry Finn when I was very young, 4th grade, 9 years old, 12 years old, and I felt like it was a child's book, even though the subject matter was a little bit tough. But in this book, this is absolutely not a child's book. unless you're an adult reading along with your child, and you can help them navigate some of the awful things that are brought up. One of the things that happens in the book is that people get lashed. That's completely scooted over in Huckleberry Finn. Also, there's rape, there's human breeding, there's scarcity, which was new to me. I just assumed that if you were owned by someone, that they were making sure that you had decent clothing and food, and that's just not true. I learned in this book that there, and some of the other books I've read, in the last few years, that a lot of the times that just wasn't the case, and that people that were enslaved had to figure things out for themselves. They had to fish, they had to learn how to catch game, and this was after working a full day, usually in the fields. Oh, and they also had little gardens. So even though these are subjects that are hard, the author presents them to the reader with a lot of eloquence. So I was really impressed with Percival Everett's ability to pull that off. The conversations in the book are witty, they're very original. I found some of the language to be anachronistic. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. On page 23, there's a reference to a higher power. And I'm thinking, higher power, that's kind of a recent term to me. And I did a little looking around online and could not find any history of using the term higher power back in this time period. Now, I admit that it was just Googled around, but when I look around, I am aware that I'm probably getting the history of white America. So maybe higher power was used amongst the language of the enslaved people. And, I know that white people have been stealing both language and music and lyrics and poetry from Black people from a very, very long time. So maybe higher power as a term came that way too. Another one is peckerhead. So these guys are talking, two Black guys are talking, and the white guy who was in the conversation leaves, and one of the guys goes, "What's that peckerhead want?" Well, I have heard the term peckerhead, but I thought that was pretty amazing that they would be using that term back before the Civil War. So I did a lot of looking around and I couldn't find it. Now, once again, that might be something that was used by enslaved people. Maybe it was part of the secret language, and it's just not going to show up in simple Google searches. A couple more were giggling like little girls. I found that to be anachronistic. They used, on page 50, the author used the term thank you. Like, how somebody might say, "Oh, well, that's very courageous of you." And then the person might respond by going, "Thank you." Like they're not really sure. Have I just been insulted? I'm not really sure how I want to respond to you, or I'm not really sure what kind of a response you want. So thank you with a question mark. And I couldn't find any use of that. The last one I found was the word problematic. It just didn't seem to me like people in that time period would be using the word problematic. Now, and I did not find it in my simple little searches, but that's really neither here nor there. Just because it didn't show up in Google searching doesn't mean that it wasn't there. So there is a sharp contrast between the experience of Huckleberry in Huckleberry Finn, who seems to be about 13 years old, and he is full of tall tales and he's extremely drawn to adventure, and the contrast between that kid and the intelligent, literate adult male who is traveling with Huck. So our author did a wonderful job of showing the difference. Now, Jim, who later renames himself as James, is trying to get free. His master has sold him. I believe it was the widow Douglas, so mistress. His mistress has sold him, and he doesn't want to be separated from his family. He has a wife and I think just one child, a little girl. And so he ran away. His intention is to get to where he can be free and get some money and then come back and buy his wife and child. So Huckleberry runs into Jim. Jim's hiding out on an island in the middle of the Mississippi. Huckleberry runs into Jim because Huckleberry also runs away. Huckleberry has a drunken father who hates him. The reason Huckleberry's father hates Huckleberry shows up later in this book. And Huckleberry is afraid for his life, and he saws his way out of a cabin where he's been enslaved, or not enslaved, but has been held captive, and he saws his way out and runs away. These two meet up on the island and decide to travel together. They've known each other forever. Ever since Huckleberry's been born, they've known each other. One of the questions that came up in the readers group was, how did James learn to read? And that never does get addressed in the book. They do talk about James breaking into Judge Thatcher's library and reading books in there. But we never do get to find out how it is that James learned to read. Maybe there was a primer in there, and Jim was so smart that he was able to learn to read from looking at the primer. I don't know. I'm just guessing. In the book, we really see the hopelessness of the enslaved people when we find out that during the course of this book, they find out that the Civil War has started. Well, Huck thinks, hey, Civil War, this sounds really fun. They had seen some people go by them on a path in uniform, and Huckleberry's like, wow, those uniforms are really cool. I think I might like to fight in the Civil War. And James is like, I don't really want to fight, Huck, because it doesn't make any difference to me whether there's a war on, whether there's not a war on, whether this one wins the war or that one wins the war. As far as the life that Jim leaves, it doesn't make any difference to him. Because as they're traveling down one side of the river, people are, slavery is legal. On the other side of the river, it's not. But if he goes to the free side, he'll still get picked up because he hasn't been made free. He'll still get picked up and carted across and returned to his owner. So it's just really a very good job of showing the sense of hopelessness that happens. So another question that came up in the book club was, what does the river mean in the book? And we talked about it, and the river means food, because they ate fish. It's transportation, because they built a raft, and that's how they moved downriver. It was safer on the river than it was on land. So it was safety, transportation. The river meant everything to them on their journey. So I'm going to end this review by saying that I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. The writing is quite good, and I learned an awful lot about racism, which I was really drawn back into the book again and again. I enjoyed reading it, and I didn't have to push myself to come back and read it some more. Everyone says that it's funny, and I read some of the opinions of others who had read the book and also listened to the people in my book club, and they really felt like it was a funny book. And Huckleberry, I thought was hilarious, but I really didn't tune into the humor in this book. I really tuned in more to the injustice that was in the book, and I don't know why I missed it. Maybe I can't focus on two things at one time. I don't know. But I do recommend it, especially if you've read Huckleberry Finn, especially if you are a white person who's on a journey like me to learn more about racism and how I can make sure that I'm not participating in it. So please let me know if you're still here. Did you read James? What did you think? Did you read Huckleberry Finn? If not, tell me, what are you reading right now? I'm interested. I really am interested. So this is Maya Effie saying goodbye and good reading.